So there's this guy, Jacob Navok, I'm not sure, who is a CEO of GenVid, but previously worked in the president's office and director of business at Square Enix, okay, reported directly to the CEO. We've actually talked about some of his posts before because he offers an interesting internal perspective on the games industry because he used to work pretty high up within Square Enix. Like he knows some stuff, you know, but he will occasionally do these like big threads on X and online where he breaks down kind of what he sees in the industry and where he thinks this is going and how things are shifting. And it's really, really interesting. It's really interesting. So, for example, here in this thread, he wants to talk about Square Enix, Microsoft layoffs, AI, and Metcalfe's Law, okay? 15 years ago, I used to work on the translation of our annual reports at Square Enix into English. One area that often required editing was the word content. It was a commonly used word in all of our IR materials. Investor relation materials is what that means. The Japanese write kontentsu, which is plural contents, and I would have to re-edit non-native speakers' edits of contents back to the correct content because otherwise the report would go out to saying English like Square Enix provides high quality contents. We use the word content a lot because we were in the content business. We made a myriad content, games, manga, anime. Starting in 2004, my boss, CEO Yoichi Wada, began writing in his annual letter to shareholders about network being the future rather than content. People assumed at the time it was about MMOs. Of course, the future was years off. In the meantime, we just made content. In 2004, the word content appeared in the annual report 90 times. Over time, though, this went down. In 2024, the word content appeared in the annual report a mere 28 times. This is going somewhere, I promise. Square Enix has spent 2 decades slowly moving away from being a content business. Not just Square Enix, but every publisher. Wada-san was right. The future of games was the network. Here's page 2 of his 2004 annual report. But the network business he imagined isn't about games being online. It's about the social network of games, Metcalfe's Law, replacing the content business. As you can see, networks will transform. The games industry is facing a fundamental realignment. This is not a passing storm. It is a change in the forces that stitched the industry together. The industry was once defined by scarcity of content. You would consume a game, finish Super Mario Bros., and move on to the next, starting Legend of Zelda. Even as the industry transitioned towards richer mediums and even MMOs, it was taken as a basic tenet that games were content. Consumers would purchase new games, thus building good content and marketing that content would lead to profitable outcomes. This is the reason why release dates for the biggest titles were set in the fall, best time to sell content into Christmas, and why there was a constant hustle for getting a unique date that didn't have something like Call of Duty or Assassin's Creed also launching that week. It was similar to the movie business. The movie is named, the date is set, ideally summer, then the content, movie is made. The studios are constantly jostling to ensure that they didn't schedule a movie at the same time as a direct quadrant competition because the audience's time is finite. A proportion of the game business still remains this way, but it is crumbling. As argued last year, the issue with the Final Fantasy series was not that its costs were too high, but that it could not guarantee the revenue needed. The audiences expected to play did not come or were not willing to pay to spend their time. And all this is building into like the broader industry forces and implications of this, okay? Because what he is about to go into more detail describing is exactly why you're seeing PlayStation change their approach with all this live service stuff. It's why Microsoft is changing their approach to this network-based setup with Game Pass and sort of interweaving games and experiences. It's why they want you on so many multiple devices and platforms that they can control or at least have a stake in. All of this is building into the same core concept, okay? So it's building. Did he factor in people having less money too? Well, I think there's a couple ways you could look at that. People are still spending a lot of money. Like, yes, incomes have not raised in line with inflation. They've largely stagnated, at least in the US. A lot of salaries have stagnated, have not been diminished by inflationary pressures. So there's things like that going on. But in terms of like spending on entertainment, for example, I think this quarter was the first time it dropped in the video games sector. I think maybe ever. Like people have not stopped spending. They may have less money, but they've still spent a ton of money in the industry. They're just spending it in other places, or they're spending it in places that they are more confident they will get the return they want out of it. So like they may not be willing to risk $60 or $70 on an iffy 78 out of 100 game. like a C plus game. They may not be willing to risk that money to do that, but they are willing to spend $20 for a DLC or to spend $10 on this skin in this game they already play. That's just what seems to be borne out by the data, that there's still a lot of spending going on even while people are being more selective with the big purchases. It's like they're being, like on the whole, on average, may not apply to you, but on average across the industry, people are more willing to spend little bits on microtransactions, but they are less willing than ever to spend money on big ticket items. To understand why, we have to take a short detour. Concurrent to the growth of this business was another new market that opened and expanded games. It began with the casuals who first picked up a Wii controller, then moved on to free-to-play mobile titles. Meanwhile, younger consumers who in their teens or 20s should be aging into traditional gamers began engaging with content very differently than the generation of players who grew up with the $50 packaged cartridges and discs. They began with always online titles like Minecraft and then grew even further with Roblox. The generation of Roblox players have no sense of games as individual pieces of content. Roblox is a platform, and on that platform is an infinite number of experiences. There's no need to leave the platform, as you can see here, but for a generation that grew up playing 3D free-to-play games, titles on hand-me-down iPad, spending $500 on gaming-only console just to be able to play is absurd. You can see how this behavior has shifted with Roblox average monthly hours of engagement on mobile skyrocketing while it stayed relatively flat. Now, we are adults, so we don't play Minecraft or Roblox even. But do you realize something very interesting? Quick, in chat, how much money did they spend on Activision Blizzard King? How much money did Microsoft spend on Microsoft Blizzard King? Do you remember? How much was that giga company worth that built Call of Duty, World of Warcraft, StarCraft, like all these amazing games? 70 billion, right? It's technically 69 billion. Do you know how much Roblox is worth? As of today, their market cap is $72 billion. Technically, I know, inflation, but inflation. Technically, Roblox is currently valued higher than Activision Blizzard King. So when like big companies like, Sony or Microsoft or whoever, or Apple or whoever, when they look at gaming, they're not just looking at like our bubble. They're not just looking at console gamers. They're looking at the $70 billion elephant in the room, which is Roblox, And so how does this affect all of this? Well, a lot of these companies are trying to identify trends and how this could affect all this, broader behaviors, because you and I may not play Roblox. I see, Mikey says you'd low-key be surprised how many young adults play Roblox. Oh, I'm sure there's actually a surprising number. But like the generation right below me, I think it's a very normal thing. My little sister, who is 18, she plays Roblox. She hops on there because she played it growing up as well. And for them, it's a very normal thing. And so these game companies are looking to the next generation because, again, they can't plan for today. They have to plan for 5, 10, 15 years from now, when those people that grew up on Roblox and were the iPad kids, when they are in their 30s and 40s and have the expendable income. How do you capture them as an audience? He continues, the younger generation has stayed with platform titles, graduating in some cases from Roblox to Fortnite, but still staying within ecosystems. Meanwhile, the casual business that had shifted to mobile started to stick with dominant forever games like Candy Crush or Clash Royale. I actually have a family member on Nikki's side of the family who is like straight up addicted to Clash of Clans, like has spent a ridiculous amount of time and money on that. So I know firsthand that there's a lot of this that can affect it. Monopoly Go has made billions since it launched. A lot of people are just hopelessly addicted to that stuff. That we're now acting closer to platforms themselves and pieces of content. Fortnite is content. It's also a platform. It's also a social network. It's also a tool. On top of this came TikTok, nipping at the heels of times spent on consoles and mobile titles alike. There is a finite time in the day. If TikTok and gambling are growing, something needs to be reduced. The TikTok feed scratches the same itch as many hyper-casual games. Watch, swipe, and the algorithm feeds you a thing that either stimulates you or doesn't, and then gets even better at serving you stimulus the more you feed it input. Yeah, it's literally just like actual brain rot. It's really it's enough to turn you into like a old man screaming at, you know, the milk truck driving by, just being like, I hate it. Back in my day, things made sense. It makes me want to do that. With competition on time looming and the biggest games becoming platforms, we are left with only the traditional packaged business continuing to function as content. But the number of hours in a day has not changed, and the amount of freely available distractions has. Scarcity is gone. Experiences are abundant, which is ever present, ever apparent, because everywhere you look, there is a new live service game competing for your time. Just recently, the latest one that I believe has now, I mean, it's quickly approaching flop territory, is FBC Firebreak. This was done by Remedy, same guys behind Control and Alan Wake 2. This was their attempt at it, at another live service game. And I mean, it launched on Xbox Game Pass, PlayStation Plus, and all that, to be perfectly fair. So looking at Steam numbers is not a great indication of this, but still, you would hope if the game was really successful, it would have more than 40 players, you know? Like, it's just, I'm sure they might have, you know, 10 times that across all the other platforms, but that's still like 400 players. And it's just because you're entering a freakishly competitive space and people only have so much time. You know, it's like I've said a bajillion times, if you're going to make a live service game, it has to not only be good, it has to be so good that people are willing to give up the game they've spent hundreds of hours in, all of the skins, all of the badges, the accomplishments. Like, it has to be so good, they're willing to give that up because they only have so much time. And for a lot of people, they're giving that up and they're also moving with their friends over to your game. Like, the reason me and my group of like brothers and sisters and friends, we played a lot of Overwatch 2 together. And then we gave that up and moved over to Marvel Rivals because it was so much better. And honestly, like, if you go and try to play Overwatch again, like, you'll be shocked because it's like 15-minute matchmaking times. You can play a whole custom game while waiting for matchmaking in Overwatch 2. Whereas in Marvel Rivals, it's literally like within 3 seconds you have a new match. It's ridiculous. And just something like that, you can get, you know, maybe 2 or 3 rounds in an hour in Overwatch, or like 7 to 8 in Marvel Rivals. You know, it's crazy. They continue on. The more platforms, whether Fortnite, Call of Duty, Roblox, Candy Crush, GTA Online, etc., dominate time spent, the less time there is for traditional fixed time content like AC Shadows. In 2019, the A16Z team wrote a piece about trends revolutionizing games, highlighting how games had network effects similar to the best social networking platforms. They were spot on, but these effects benefited the incumbents, not new entrants. And A16Z placed a smart bet on pre-IPO Roblox, which was very smart of them at the time. Jacob continues on. Games had indeed reached their network era, but there are very few successful new social networks. In the last decade, the only one that has grown to any prominence to rival Facebook's Blue app and Instagram has been TikTok, with Snapchat having remained relatively small. This means that if games become social networks, there will be few winners. Basic Economics explains as well. Earlier this year, Zynga's Star Wars Hunters shut down. Let's say they had 1 million players and generated $1 million in revenue. These are nonsense numbers. I'm just making an example. Let's say they intended to invest the revenue back into content and thus had a plan to deliver $1 million worth of content more in live operations. Meanwhile, let's say Fortnite has 100 million players and generates $100 million in revenue, and they can deliver $100 million worth of content more in live operations. My friend who had been playing Star Wars Hunters said that he ran out of content quickly and thus gave up after a few weeks, and he has not stopped playing Fortnite because, of course, they can afford to just be the behemoth. With a larger player base and less revenue, Fortnite can outspend 99% of developers in the market, which is true. And this is what we just saw with Mind's Eye and with that Everywhere game from Build a Rocket Boy. Their goal was to basically make an adult Roblox. And I mean, we all know kind of how that went. Everywhere game. Like, this was their goal, to build something like this. They wanted to have this big platform where there are a bunch of different experiences. They wanted to be that network that all the friends hop in, you play different game modes and all this. And this still isn't out. This was revealed, I believe this is the original trailer from 2022, re-uploaded in 23. I'm not sure. But this was their vision. They wanted to do this. But the problem is, if you don't have a Fortnite game to bankroll it, you are doing this on venture capital. You're doing this on like angel investors and all sorts of stuff. And eventually the money dries up, because to compete with Fortnite, you need to spend billions, because that's how much they're spending. That's how much they're spending. Not easy. Not easy to compete with that. They continue. You cannot be the best basic economics that their cost of development is covered by much higher demand, enabling them to build more content. This is the transition point. We have moved from a content-based business to a social media business based on platforms that can constantly improve thanks to scale. You used to consume content and move on to the next. Now content is platform-based. This is the difference between a movie, such as this week's Superman film, and YouTube, which is the latest Luke Stevens video, right? When it comes to digital video platforms, there are only a handful of winners: YouTube, TikTok, and everyone else is simply a creator on that platform. See Grow a Garden. If you don't know about this, Grow a Garden is like a separate mode in Roblox. It's kind of like, what was that old Facebook game? Farmville. It's kind of like that, but in Roblox. This Roblox game, in a matter of months, has far surpassed the concurrence of any Western game in history, even Fortnite. It may not sustain this. It doesn't need to. It grew Roblox as a platform tremendously. It made Roblox sticker, enabled more creators to build on Roblox, and brought more users to play Roblox games. Here is their concurrent user growth this year. Look at this. This is concurrent player numbers, okay? June 21st, you see this peak right around here. Over 20 million concurrent players. 20 million. We just looked at FBC Firebreak that had 40 on Steam. Like, starting to appreciate the crazy volume that they're able to pull. It's outrageous, okay? It's outrageous. This does not mean that games will go away in the same way that movies and television did not go away with the advent of YouTube, but we are fighting for time. Time does not increase. TikTok increasingly taking up time that once belonged to more casual play. Hardcore players are aging out and younger players are drawn to Roblox. This is the problem that Microsoft faced in 2025. Phil Spencer is staring down the barrel of an industry that's changed drastically since he greenlit Perfect Dark's reboot. It's changed drastically even in the few years since they made the case to acquire Activision Blizzard for $68 billion. I believe it eventually became 69, but anyway. The symptoms are becoming clearer. Prior to 2024, a situation like Concord had never occurred. $400 million and 8 years of people's lives gone permanently in 2 weeks. Zero revenue generated. Every sale was refunded. This is astonishing. We'd had Duke Nukem Forever incidents before, and Duke Nukem Forever wasn't refunded, but never something at the scale of Concord. We have still, as an industry, not truly processed what Concord's utter collapse meant. We were quick to sweep it under the rug, thinking it was endemic to the quirks of a hero shooter, but we cannot ignore what happened to Concord because it's about to become the norm. As you can see, the headline clipped here, Marathon isn't going to be another Concord, Sony insists. Now we need that. You sure about that? Are you sure about that? We need that clip coming in. I think at this point it's more likely that it is than it isn't, but you know, we'll see. In June 2025, was in fact a critical month for the games industry. This stat is going to blow your mind, okay? I'm about to depress the hell out of you, and I need you guys to stay strong with me, okay? Stay strong. We can read this together and we won't lose our minds, okay? It's about to be, you're about to just go, bro, okay? Because I hadn't heard it phrased this way, but it's going to blow your mind. Nearly $1 billion in game investment went into the following games in June alone. $400 million for Mind's Eye, $100 million for Splitgate 2, hundreds of millions more for Marathon, and tens of millions for Firebreak. These are just 4 titles that in June announced that their launches or betas had not gone as planned. All of them plan to make fixes, but how are many of us to believe that the market can sustain or expand for these titles? Again, that's nearly $1 billion in investment between them. And almost certainly all of these are going to lose money and shut down fairly quickly. In June alone, we've seen 4 separate projects that represent $1 billion that have just gone like belly up. But this is money that's being spent in some cases for like single player games, like, you know, Mindside, technically single player. It also is like supposed to be a platform, but it's weird. But these other ones are live service games. It's why really like I think that this era of like new live service IP and stuff, it very quickly I think is coming to an end. Because think about it yourself. If you were asked not to spend millions, but even if you were asked to put $500, 1,000, like it's a decent chunk of change. Somebody like came up to you and asked, "Can you invest a $500 into my live service project?" Very unlikely you say yes, especially if it's not from one of these like really established IP like a Call of Duty or something, you know, because it's so competitive, and it's just, even when it's decently successful, it still is very easy for it to flop, you know, just doesn't work. Small Time, thank you for that super chat. Some metrics from Roblox in May 2025 taken from the trusted analytical tools. Monthly active users were 345 million. Total monthly downloads, 23 million. Monthly revenue was 37.6 million USD. Whoa, baby. And that's also why there's a lot of money flowing into Roblox, is because they feel like that platform is fairly under monetized. I don't know if those revenue numbers are correct, but I have heard and read a couple of articles describing how part of the reason so much money is flowing into Roblox right now is because they see it as a massive platform that hasn't fully monetized its user base yet, which is going to be interesting because it's a lot of like kids. So I don't know how you monetize it for children, but I'm sure they'll find a way. They always do. Side note, FBC Firebreak was available for free to Game Pass PlayStation Plus subscribers. Splitgate 2 is also free. Don't be misled by articles like the one in the image below that the industry's problems can be chalked up to Game Pass, a service with barely any growth in the last few years. Game Pass didn't save FBC in the competition with Roblox, Fortnite at all. The real problem for FBC is people are playing the wildly successful free games that are driving tens of billions of dollars in revenue relative to Game Pass's more paltry user base and revenue numbers. Yeah, I mean, I think it's... going on Game Pass and PlayStation Plus and all that, the goal was for it to save FBC and to help them still get more users and stuff. But even then, when you are like on Xbox or the Game Pass app or something, and you're looking at FBC Firebreak and you're like, hey, what game should I play with my friends tonight? You can do that, or you can hop into other Game Pass titles like Call of Duty, Overwatch. If you were so inclined, you could download something for free like Marvel Rivals. You know, there's just a lot of other more compelling options out there, I think. Many people have argued that this is a cost problem, saying that we can resolve the industry's problems by fixing the cost base. Fewer assets, smaller worlds, AI. I've heard companies say that. Oh, just use AI. It'll make games cheaper to make. That'll fix it. However, that's for AAA, and fixing the cost base doesn't resolve the lack of players. A shorter Final Fantasy 17 is not going to make more demand. We have a serious demand problem, which I argued a few days ago. I'm going to take the detour here. I've seen people shocked at the cost of games. GTA 6 will likely cost $2.5 billion to develop by the time it's released. Salaries have gone up, crunch has gone down, team sizes are huge, and you have one shot to get an audience, such as we saw with the June titles. You need an exceptional title at launch to not be cyberpunked, and so the money is spent. It can only be this way. The middle is gone. You're either an indie, and I include Claire Obscura as an indie, or you are nine figures. Yeah. It seems like, you know, the AA size stuff is gone, and like more independent AAA stuff is largely getting pushed out. It's true, and I mean the crunch. I actually I saw a producer mention this. I forget who they worked for, but it was like one of the big guys, like EA or Activision or something like that. Former producer, I should say. But they were saying how the lack of crunch is also responsible for a lot of the rising dev costs. He's like, we used to be able to get 70 hours out of people in a week, sometimes 80 hours if we really wanted to push it. He's like, now, if we're stuck at 8 hours, yeah, shocker, it takes twice as long for that person to do the same amount of work. I was like, Jesus. Makes sense. Yeah, technically, yeah, if you can't push people to work 16-hour days, it will take you longer, I guess. Yeah, that's true. And therefore it'll be more expensive. But that just reminds me of that the producer was basically blaming treating people decently as being responsible for it. Again, this is what the audience wants. It's silly to blame studios and publishers when any flaw in a title is magnified by 1,000 YouTubers and gaming websites saying, look at this snarky Reddit post. Management cannot infinitely invest and the chickens either come home to roost or the title gets canceled, such as Microsoft cancellations last week. To that end, we cannot both argue that developers need to be trusted to make games, but also realize that it's not management making day-to-day content decisions in games where there are 100 plus people working. Management did not design a giant yellow trash can as a main character in Concord. When you spend years to make the game, mistakes get made and then get compounded. Management are then asked for more money and time. Eventually the threshold gets passed and this becomes a fool's errand because demand never comes. Battlefield has a problem too. I mean, I think with Concord especially though, that was a project, in my opinion, that should have never been greenlit by management. The concept wasn't compelling. I think like how a lot of this works is that they'll get the initial green light based on the pitch. They'll work on a vertical slice, and then the like management guys, the big suits will come back. They'll see the demo, they'll try it, they'll see more of the vision, and they give thumbs up, thumbs down. If it's really bad, they'll cancel it and they move on from there. And there's regular checks like that. I feel like Concord could have been stopped at any point along that journey, that 8-year journey. There were many exit ramps off that highway to devastation. They just put the pedal to the metal though and kept going. And it apparently, based on the reporting and leaks and stuff, was because Herman Holst, the head honcho guy, was so delusional with Concord that he called it, a Star Wars level title. He thought it was going to be the next big thing, which any gamer who saw it was like, no way in hell. Which is why immediately when it was revealed, it was ridiculed and mocked so heavily. Because everybody could see it, but it was just because like the management up on high was apparently that deluded, and nobody wanted to be the person that stood up to Herman Holst. Nobody wants to stand up to the big guy who's in charge, Nobody wants to do that. It's really tricky, but they continue on. Additionally, if you think $400 million for Battlefield is too high or $2.5 billion for GTA 6 is insane, by definition, you are saying those people working on it should not have had jobs. We cannot expect that everyone should be employed. Games can be developed perfectly and no flaws will be accepted. This is a complete inconsistency this is a completely inconsistent set of arguments, yet appears frequently. I mean, I think players are demanding more. They're more selective with their money. Players don't want their developers to have to crunch, but they don't want games to take longer. So you need bigger teams, and that drives up cost even more. If the game is not a really solid game because prices have risen, people are more selective and won't buy it. And so it just is a cycle that spins and spins and spins. Prices have risen, people are more selective, but now less people are buying those games. So you have to raise the price if that number of customers stays consistent, and then even fewer people are buying the game because they're even more skeptical and suspicious and their demands are higher. So it's just like a constantly turning self-fulfilling prophecy. It's why, like, really initially it seems like raising prices on a game from 70 to 80 or 80 to 90 fixes a problem, or from 60 to 70, 70 to 80. But it doesn't. Like, it kind of assumes that the same number of players will buy it. Yeah, if we have 100 customers and we charge them 12% more, we will make 12% more money. That's only true if 100 people buy it at 12% more, If now only 70% of people or 70 people buy your product, it doesn't matter. Like, it just doesn't matter. You raise the price, but you're actually ending up behind where you were initially because you lost so many customers in the process. It's just done. But then he goes into more discussions over AI, more discussions over things like mobile games such as Scopely spending insane amounts of money on Monopoly Go. They've also taken in literal billions of dollars in revenue from Monopoly Go. It's made stupid amounts of money. And then here he comes to this bit, which is also interesting. The ultimate ticking time bomb is Roblox and UEFN. As the generations that grow up with it continue to stay, I return to grow a garden growth. This is not a coincidence. Gamers who are happy with Roblox and UEFN will stay with it, just as the YouTube generation of kids continues to watch YouTube. This platform effect, Metcalfe's Law, is the future of games and will continue to grow. Death Stranding 2 sales, meanwhile, barely passed Claire Obscure in its first 3 days, and that's if you generously discount the fact that Claire was free on Game Pass, and Death Stranding 1 on D1 was free on Game Pass on day one. and grew massively faster shortly after due to good word of mouth, hitting 3.3 million copies in its first month, whereas it would normally taper. A dollar spent on Death Stranding 2 in this industry is better spent on trying to make Fortnite, see Phil's dilemma above, which is why Sony will keep trying to make something out of its Bungie acquisition. Marathon will release, but won't solve the problem. Roblox and Epic already have forever platforms. Sony needs its own, or it will still be in the content business in a network business era. Nintendo may be happy to stay forever as a content business, but I suspect Sony isn't able to say the same, which is true. And he goes on. I mean, I highly recommend that you go and check this out because he has a lot of very interesting insights, and he does these big threads pretty regularly. So there's always a lot of interesting tidbits. But I think the main takeaways again are just that the industry is changing, and if you want to compete on the live service stage, which is where most of the money is, you have to have one of those big platform games. And the platform games like a Roblox, like a Fortnite, like a GTA Online, those are freakishly expensive to produce, and they are still highly, highly competitive. And so it's just a changing world. It's a changing world, but that's what people have to come to grips with. And that's what they're trying to come to grips with. And it's why Sony will continue to spend ridiculous sums of money trying to make this work and trying to get their own. It's why Herman Hulse said, we're not going to give up on it. We're going to try again. They're going to put Marathon out. It probably doesn't do too well and they move on. And then they'll try another one. They'll see if Fair Game $sign does well. Nope. Okay. Well, we're going to try again. Let's see if we can get the Horizon game working. Nope. Okay. Try again. Like, that's just how it goes. Because again, if you get one success, one platform level game that blows up, that can be enough to justify the losses for everything else. But what I think is not being factored in from PlayStation specifically is how much damage this pursuit is doing to all of their other ventures and all their other pursuits. Because every time they have one of their big studios waste 5 years developing a live service game that ends up going nowhere and either flops or gets canceled, that takes away from not just revenue, but also fan satisfaction from their single player teams. And it also loses a lot of talent. Like, a lot of these devs don't want to make big live service games. Like, they want to work on single player stuff. They want to work on narrative stuff. They want to work on adventure games. They don't want to be pumping out another Fortnite clone, So it's just going to be very interesting. The next 5 years is going to be fascinating to see. Hopefully more companies kind of learn the lesson and don't continue making the same mistakes. But, Sony's just going to keep trying, to win at blackjack over and over and over again, see if anything happens with it. Eventually, if they keep spending billions on it, eventually they should, just as a matter of math, they should stumble into accidental success eventually. But as of right now, I don't see anything on the horizon where I'm like, oh, I think this is it. That's the tricky bit, is that, some games you see them and you're like, oh, I could see this being big. Yeah, I think this could be it. I don't think, I think we all see Arc Raiders. That could be big. Arc Raiders looks really good. I think that could be big. I don't see anything from PlayStation where I'm like, this could be the next big thing. Even like the leaked stuff. Like, the more Horizon multiplayer stuff gets leaked, the more people say that it's cringe and get frustrated. Yeah, I'm not going to pull it up right now, but if you want to see some of the leaked character designs and leaked stuff from the Horizon Online game, you can Google it and find it. It will surprise you. We'll see if it ends up looking that way. But I can see the YouTube videos already. I can already see them in my mind's eye. I think Horizon, one of the reasons Horizon's been utilized so much is because it is a very marketable IP. Like, it's really easy to frame that and to put it in a commercial. It's really easy to put it on a poster. Like, it's just very easy to sell in that way. But I do think it just hasn't earned the respect of players in the same way that some of these other IP have. Horizon Zero Dawn, Forbidden West both sold really well, tens of millions of units. Yeah, no, like I said, they're really good showcase games too. They're really good for showcasing the power of devices. But Horizon Forbidden West underperformed the first game by a pretty significant margin in terms of sales. The DLC did decently, especially being PS5 exclusive. You couldn't play it on PS4, but it also kind of just came and went. But they've continued to try to double down. They tried to do the VR game. The VR game was received kind of to mediocre reception. And now they're greenlighting a big MMO. They're greenlighting they did the Lego game that also flopped pretty catastrophically, and they're trying. Haven't seen Horizon get hate necessarily. Just see a lot of people stating how they really aren't that great for how much Sony pushes them. Well, I think it's also just a general vibe with like the stop trying to make fetch happen thing, where it's like they're trying so hard to make it the next big thing that people are just kind of like, can we chill? He took my thing.